This is the story of a forest whose only frontiers once seemed to be the sky and sea. Each of its trees and streams was a haven of life. In 1832, a naturalist beginning a round-the-world voyage in Brazil was amazed to find the richest biodiversity he'd ever seen. 20,000 plant species, more than 250 different mammals, 340 amphibians, and 350 types of fish. The enthralled traveler's name was Charles Darwin. Back then, the Atlantic forest, which the Portuguese called Mata Atlântica, covered an area equivalent to France, Germany, and Spain combined. Its green sea ran all the way down the ocean coast from the north of Brazil to Argentina. From west to east, it offered a variety of ecosystems ranging from mangrove swamps to vast stretches of pines and broad-leaved trees. The forest seemed eternal, but in time, this is what happened. Stone, concrete, steel, and plastic. Devastation heaped on ruin. First, the forest was cut down for its wood, especially from a tree red as the embers in a brazier, the Brazil, which gave the country its name. Then land was cleared to create coffee plantations. Later, the Industrial Revolution razed what remained of the original forest. Finally, the city of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil's capital until 1960, stretched to the horizon like the country's industrial capital, São Paulo. The people who lived in these megalopolises cleared still more land to farm the earth and grow pasture for their herds. They planted sugarcane and ripped open the ground to dig mines. 93% of the forest was lost. The great stream of vegetation that had once run unbroken for 3,000 kilometers from north to south was reduced to mere scraps of jungle like confetti on a concrete slab. Then came a miracle. In some of these islands of nature, a few golden lion tamarins survived, members of the Mata Atlântica's characteristic species. There weren't enough to keep the species viable, but when individuals were brought from zoos and reserves all over the world and reintroduced, the tamarin population grew from 200 in 1970 to 1,600 today. All the golden lion tamarins, normally a uniform fawn color, are marked by biologists with a black dye in a pattern that forms an individual code on their coat. Some are even fitted with transmitters. Today, a group of tamarins are finding it hard to shake off their drowsiness. They huddle together for warmth and seek out the sunshine on the highest branches at their cruising height of 10 to 30 meters. Shortly, they'll head back down a few meters in search of the insects and fruit they feed on. The golden lion tamarin is still endangered. Its population must reach 2,500, but that will take 25,000 hectares of forest in Rio State alone, compared to 10,000 today. The Mico-Leão Dourado Association is campaigning to increase the surface area of the forest and save the golden lion tamarin. Gustavo and his team identify forest zones that could be linked by secure corridors. This would provide groups of tamarins with more living space and enable them to share their genes with other populations. In most cases, the planned corridor crosses privately owned land. Gustavo and his people will have to convince the owner, but they have a plan. It involves knowledge of the law and a strong dose of intelligence. To set up his biological corridor, Gustavo has to persuade the owner to turn part of his land into a small nature reserve. If he agrees, he'll never be able to use that area again. So Gustavo naturally needs powerful arguments, which he works on all through the journey with his team.
Como é que vai, Carlos? Prazer?
Ô, Sérgio.
Como é que vai?
Tudo jóia?
Você tem nome diferente.
É Rosan.
José.
This man seems friendly enough, but the negotiations are tough. He once tried to build a stone dam without a permit to make a reservoir on his huge estate. The project breached environmental protection regulations, and work was stopped when he was threatened with legal action. He also wants to open an adventure camp featuring the longest rope bridge in the world, a plan that would make use of the hills. With this in mind, Gustavo suggests a deal. They'll agree to the ecotourism park and help him set it up lawfully if, in return, he turns part of his land into a reserve. Reforestation is a never-ending task. Millions of palms, begonias, and orchids, along with Brazil, palisander, mahogany, and fig trees, have to be replanted. Fortunately, the project has been given a powerful boost. When applying to host the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, the government promised an unprecedented reforestation campaign. In the state of Rio alone, it plans to plant 24 million trees. The project will employ tens of thousands of paid and volunteer workers for years, tirelessly sowing, taking cuttings, watering, hooing, and weeding. Thanks to the Olympic Games, the aim of regenerating 30% of the Mata Atlântica is no longer just a dream. Results gradually begin to show. Belts of new forest run along the hills and cross moors and grassland. Life returns to these strips of restored forest faster than expected. Here, for instance, howler monkeys have steadily colonized the treetops. Howler monkeys stick together in groups of a dozen individuals. They can only survive if the forest is in good health. They eat leaves and buds picked from the highest twigs, moving slowly as they meticulously harvest the jungle's wealth, using their prehensile tails to hang from branches. That the species has been able to reestablish itself here and there proves that the dream of restoring one of the world's most beautiful forests is perfectly feasible. The battle isn't over, though. Here, not far from the famous statue of Christ on Corcovado Mountain, a vulnerable, fertile mangrove swamp environment once flourished where sea meets land. The mangrove swamp was destroyed and the area urbanized. The canal that crossed it was so choked with waste that the water was never more than 40 centimeters deep. Today, the construction of a new bridge is dependent on the restoration of that mangrove swamp. 400,000 cubic meters of toxic heavy metals and 3 million cubic meters of waste have been dredged from the canal. Adriano Luz is a scientist. He is assessing the impact of urban development on the environment. To do so, he's studying one of the most vulnerable classes of animals, amphibians, including frogs, toads, and salamanders. Any damage to the environment has an immediate effect on these species.
This one's typical of the highlands and well-conserved forest.
No caso, essa espécie
This species has interdigital membranes between its front and rear toes.
To inventory populations, Adriano Luz records the precise spots where he catches batracians in a given zone.
Its common name is frog in pajamas, you see? He really looks like he's wearing pajamas. This one's a horned toad. It's very useful because it's found everywhere from lowlands to highlands. There are different species, and it's an excellent environmental indicator.
Ela também é indicador ambiental. Olha só, isso aqui, por exemplo.
Look, this one's a species that adapts very well to the presence of humans. You generally find it near country houses. Some people keep it as a pet. It eats a lot of insects, particularly cockroaches, and that's why people are very fond of it. It's called the cururu frog here.
Every morning, Adriano Luz inventories his haul. His aim is to mark each batracian. This was once done by severing a given digit on each leg according to a precise code, but Luz uses a non-invasive method, marking the skin with a fluorescent liquid. The body part marked indicates the place of initial capture, so when he finds animals that have already been marked, the biologist can follow population developments. His initial results show that the slightest human presence immediately reduces the number of batracians, but that restoring their biotope reverses this effect more slowly but surely.
The most harmful thing for amphibians about a human presence is pets, for two reasons. First of all, pets are often predators, such as cats and dogs. Then there's also an invisible threat, disease. For instance, cats can be infected with toxoplasmosis and pass it on to indigenous animals who have no defense against it. That can easily happen in an area such as this one, even though there's little sign of human presence.
All that remains is to release the frogs and toads in the hope that they'll be recaptured one day. Their location a few months later will provide valuable information about how the environment is recovering. Human presence has other negative impacts on forest populations, particularly because it modifies animal behavior. For instance, opossums proliferate near food sources such as trash cans and dumps. The second humans turn their backs, opossums raid the garbage. The opossum is the only American marsupial, which means that, like the kangaroo and other Australian animals, it carries its babies in a pouch on its belly all the time they're growing. In Brazil, people find them as undesirable as rats. Along the Fondo Canal, where there was once a mangrove swamp, the plan is to plant 70,000 mangoes. Other trees and plants will soon complete the area's makeover. Mangrove swamp ecosystems have very high biodiversity. They also help to fix and stabilize soil. They retain alluvium, vital for such an environmentally damaged region if egrets and other banished animals are to return one day. It's a Herculean task because the soil's been poisoned by urban pollution. Work is supervised by a biologist, Professor Mario Moscatelli.
Barely 2 years ago, there was a giant dump here. The waste dump still exists, but cut off behind the dikes that protect the young mangrove swamp area. Sadly, the rivers of Rio de Janeiro have been turned into sewers. That's a very serious problem. If this mangrove swamp is to continue to develop, we'll need to protect it from waste pollution. In Guanabara Bay, we should find 500 species, but there are only about 100 today, the ones that have managed to survive the process of deterioration caused by humans.
A protective barrier has been built in the water to hold back waste from the city and port of Rio before it reaches the mangrove swamp. For 20 years, a keen ornithologist has been observing developments in this ecosystem next to the campus of Rio University. His name is Alfredo Heleno. He records each new bird and mammal finally returning to the land their ancestors fled. Heleno is already seeing his dream taking form. Many birds are back.
Although the work's still ongoing, you can already sense an improvement. The water's flowing much more strongly. This region was one of the worst damaged, and we're restoring it. Its state is still changing, and I hope that in time the mangrove swamp will spread and new species of bird will come. It's wonderful to see lots of ducks. For instance, white-faced whistling ducks, which were so rare here, now forming little groups. Other birds typical to mangrove swamps have been seen again.
The spoonbill has joined the 174 resident and migratory bird species, 23 of which had vanished from the region. Spoonbills feed on shellfish and fish, so their presence shows that the water is teeming with life once again.
But let's not forget that there's a lot left to do.
While it's important for the animals to return, they must, unlike the opossums, also continue to behave as they should in the wild. Carlos Ruiz is an ethologist or behavioral specialist. He has this rule in mind as he studies the social habits of the prized golden lion tamarins. This golden lion tamarin is ready to defend his new territory. He marks it with his scent and warns off potential intruders with a whole range of cries.
A very interesting side of the tamarin's behavior is their system of communication. Since they travel through the forest all the time, they need to stay grouped. They can make 18 different sounds depending on the situation. Some sounds warn of a predator coming from the air or from the ground. There's also an alarm call that's called the long cry, which is used to defend territory and can carry for very long distances.
Although tamarins aren't as at home on the ground as they are in the treetops, since the forest hasn't fully recovered yet, they're sometimes forced to leave the branches to find insects, especially in the afternoon and at the end of the day. They deftly use their long, slim fingers to root them out of the bamboo stems and crevices where they hide. The small primates have a keen sense of touch, which they use to locate their prey and extract it from its refuge. Tamarins are active for 12 hours a day. When they're not hunting insects, they spend their time sucking eggs taken from nests or stuffing themselves with ripe fruit. They never sleep twice in a row in the same tangle of creeper or hole. They cover nearly 1.5 kilometers a day, which makes the size of the forest they live in a vital issue. What good does it do to restore the Atlantic forest if the crimes against it continue? Government officials responsible for environmental inspection can only identify areas of illegal clearing by helicopter. This means of transport is also essential to spot the hill tracks that operational squads will have to follow to catch traffickers red-handed. Only visible from the sky, a vast stretch of mountain has been stripped here.
We're good. I've noted the coordinates. We'll come back on the ground.
Protecting the forest also means looking after the rivers that irrigate it. Watercourses are targeted by other offenders.
Where's the river? Where's the river you want to follow?
The officers are looking for spots where sand is being quarried from rivers without a permit.
Look over there, a fresh heap of sand. Can you see the hidden heap of sand over there?
The value of sand and gravel for construction sites is soaring because of Brazil's economic growth, and its extraction is destroying rivers. Well-organized traffickers have even set up camp here. A short way off, the inspectors catch sight of their trucks.
NPW 3748, is that it?
KOC 0077, KOC 0077.
The helicopter has to approach quite closely to make out the license plates before the two trucks can get away.
They've stopped loading. They're heading out.
Ideally placed to witness the damage done to the forest, these inspectors are also in a position to enjoy the beauty of mountains that have only been protected from harm by their inaccessibility. The decline of the Atlantic forest has been accompanied by an increase in animal trafficking. Every year, the CETAS, or Sorting Center for Forest Animals, takes in 7,000 to 8,000 animals trapped by poachers or confiscated from private individuals who are keeping them illegally as pets. As Tatiana feeds these baby brown pygmy owls with tweezers, Larissa Amorim takes care of a young howler monkey.
He was found in the home of an old woman who apparently bought him from a trafficker. The poacher killed this little monkey's mother to take him. Naturally, we'll try to reintroduce them into the wild. It's easier for birds, but you have to give them time. They must learn to fly before they're released.
Daniel Marchesi Neves is the head veterinarian. He has to care for the animals passing through the center, as well as nearly 2,000 who'll stay there all their lives.
This is the Sapaju house. They're very common monkeys. People buy them as pets because when they're still little, they're very cute and playful. But then, when they grow up, they begin to rebel and start smashing everything. Not knowing what else to do, people give them to us because they can't look after them anymore.
Used to human care, these animals will never be able to return to the wild. They wouldn't survive there. Using remote monitoring cameras, Ricardo Bottecchia is conducting research to find ways of reducing the stress the animals feel when they're raised in captivity at the CETAS or elsewhere.
This monitoring is to study their behavior. We're building up an image bank to try and understand the stress these animals suffer in captivity. It's a real problem because they're going to spend their entire life in prison. What should we do with them? There's an urgent need to do something, but what?
Most of the center's animals are brought there by military or civil police, particularly teams specialized in the repression of trafficking and firefighters who pass on animals found in the city. Today, a member of the Army's Forest Battalion has confiscated a number of birds.
We have a lot of work statewide for a single battalion. But we're out in the field every day, fighting crime.
Animal trafficking is the third largest criminal trade in the world, after drugs and weapons. A litter of orphaned armadillos came in a few days ago. They're only weaned at the age of 3 months. In the meantime, they have to be fed on milk. Later, they'll eat insects and worms. Each arrival brings sad news. The mother of these young opossums was killed. They'll join some still younger opossums who arrived last week. Opossums are common in Brazil, but the center's policy is to protect all life, whatever the individual.
Any animal that comes here is treated with great affection, and the ultimate aim is to return it to the wild.
Tortoises, owls, toucans, parrots, monitor lizards. This center is a regular Noah's Ark. Sometimes a wound needs to be stitched, a bandage applied, or a broken beak repaired. The veterinarian dispensary is always busy. Birds are the poacher's first victims. They're easy to capture in nets and sell on. They are often exported to Europe or North America. To acquire an extremely rare bird such as the Spix macaw, collectors can pay as much as 50,000 euros. Generally, though, the birds that overcrowd the center's aviaries are less noble species, although just as essential to biodiversity. Danielle Neves assesses the health of newly arrived animals. In one case, a broken leg will have to be set. In another, a broken wing fixed. Several dozen operations are performed each day. The center is a refuge for orphans, the lame, and the victims of deforestation. A small primate has found his way into the macaw aviary. While most of the animals in the center have little choice in the matter, this one is an intruder, a pilferer and scrounger, only there to steal the bird's food. He'll leave as he came, like a thief in the night. Although he looks unimpressive, the thieving little monkey is yet another threat to the Atlantic forest, and its characteristic inhabitant, the golden lion tamarin. It is one of what zoologists call an invasive species.
It's a marmoset. This specimen in particular is a hybrid of the common and Cerrado's marmoset. These animals were brought here by illegal trafficking in wild animals. They were released in the region a long time ago. They're very resilient and endanger biodiversity, firstly because they compete for food with the golden lion tamarin, and secondly because they've been in contact with humans, so they can introduce diseases.
The tamarins have to coexist with the marmosets, which are half their size, but twice as aggressive. This coexistence could be fatal to the little reddish primates who've already been brought back from the brink once. Scientists are trying to learn more about the invasion process to find a way of protecting the tamarins. Hermano Nunes is one of them.
The research is designed to find out more about how groups of tamarins and marmosets use spatial and social information in their search for food.
In other words, the goal is to assess the way marmosets infiltrate groups of tamarins to locate their sources of food and eat at their expense. To understand the secrets of this rivalry, Hermano Nunes has laid out food on platforms in closed boxes. The way in which each species visits this grocery store and chooses its dish of the day will reveal its feeding strategies. The tamarins generally arrive first, followed by the marmosets. Each has previously been marked by the scientist.
Before this experiment, we caught all the individuals in the area to mark them. That was one of the requirements for this research. Each tamarin and marmoset had to be individually identified. I've given them identification markings specific to each one. It's hard work. The problem I had was that the same individuals got caught in my traps more than once, and others not at all. Day after day, I found the same ones, and began to think that they'd never tire of falling for my traps.
The tamarins find the feeding platforms quickly, and they are soon followed by the marmosets. Hermano uses a pocket recorder to describe every movement.
Pega pedaço na boca, mais 3 laranjas 3. Chega à plataforma 2, pessoal. Caixinha D, caixinha B, caixinha A. 1, 2, 3, chega à plataforma 2.
Some boxes are empty. The contents of others vary according to logical sequences. It is soon apparent that the tamarins are faster at deducing the presence of food. The marmosets then take advantage of the tamarins' intelligence. Once the red primates have worked out the location of the full boxes, the marmosets simply imitate them and grab the food before their rivals. The monkeys move around the platforms in a fascinating ballet as their hidden observer looks on. The tamarins are the inevitable losers here. The tragedy is that this rivalry threatens the survival in the wild of populations miraculously saved from extinction. Since the forest has shrunk, the marmosets have invaded urban areas. Here in Rio de Janeiro, marmosets running along electric cables are as common a sight as squirrels capering in the trees. People have grown used to the marmosets and don't realize they're invasive animals who spread at the cost of other species. Some cariocas feed the little primates as if they were pets. It is precisely this fondness for the animals of the Atlantic forest that has long contributed to the loss of its mammals, reptiles, and birds trapped for sale as pets. In the towns and suburbs, large groups of marmosets have colonized the biggest urban forest in the world. In other places, where work has been done to restore the forest, the inhabitants know that the tamarin must be protected from its rivals. This morning, a popular presenter named Mario Dimas Lima is on air at the local radio station.
It's 9 a.m., and it looks like being a beautiful Saturday in our area. Today, we're going to talk about the golden lion tamarin. We want to launch its bid to become the mascot of the Rio de Janeiro Olympic Games, It's an animal that only lives in the state of Rio. And it's golden like the gold medals Brazil's athletes hope to win in the Olympics. To illustrate the campaign, we have Donna Carlita in the studio. She's going to tell us what the golden lion tamarin means to her.
O que representa, Dona Carlinha? Muito bom dia. O que representa o mico-leão dourado para você?
Hello. It means a lot of different things to me. Without it, we rural farmers wouldn't be around. When the reserve was set up to save the golden lion tamarin, we were living there. We were officially allocated.
Conservation of the golden lion tamarin and massive reforestation have radically changed the lives of the local inhabitants around the reserves and biological corridors. Carmozinha is a farmer. She is helping to restore the Atlantic forest in her own way.
I love this place. And I protect the animals. When I came here, there were only 2 trees. We planted all the rest.
The Maine Forest Conservation Society's aim was to make each farmer a nature warden. Some were hooked and have turned their farms into their own mini Atlantic forests, planted with bromeliads, fig trees, climbing plants, and orchids, and home to anteaters, armadillos, parrots, and weaver birds. Just replanting isn't enough. Trees need help to reach maturity. Bush has to be cleared and weeds pulled up to prevent them from stifling the young shoots. Prisoners perform this task near the rivers and are paid a wage for their community work. The water company supports the project because a healthy forest means purer, more easily treated water downstream.
I'm very proud. The project very efficiently brings together all the environmental and social stakeholders. We recruit prisoners, giving them work and an opportunity to prove they can fit back into society. All of that improves their lives and the lives of the young shoots.
I like this work a lot. It helps me from day to day and helps my family too. We get paid. In our situation, it's a great opportunity to feel useful that's been given to us.
Thanks to all the initiatives in the run-up to the Olympic Games, the forest is reappearing. From the roots to the canopy of this incredible project, a sap is rising, formed by the goodwill of tens of thousands of volunteers who are making sure that nature survives the dazzling economic growth of Brazil.
Just a year ago, there was nothing here. Now see what it looks like today. We're lucky that nature's so dynamic. You just have to help it a little and it does the rest.
Now, the eye can follow these strips of forest that run along rivers and the ridges of hills. They are new biological corridors where animals can wander from one patch of forest to another. The job isn't over, and there's no sign it ever will be, but every day, new paths are open to tamarins and jaguars.
Não, acho que nem precisa, porque se a gente for... deixar aberto, na volta a gente fecha.
As you can see, they move around a lot. It was thought they wouldn't use this corridor, but they do now.
Today, Andrea Martins, representing the Mico Leal Dourado Society, is inspecting one of these corridors. A sloth hanging from its branch, an almost miraculous sight in an area that was still farmland just a few years ago. But what Andrea Martins is hoping for is that a group of golden lion tamarins, previously confined to a small area of forest, will have found their way down the corridor to expand their territory. After searching for a few hours, she finds proof that the reforestation drive has worked.
Look, Julio. She's got babies. 2 babies. They're so lovely. Let me check. It's the Affection 2 group. Yes, that's it. I've been working with the golden lion tamarins since 1984, when they were first reintroduced. When I started, the population was thought to be 200 or 300 individuals. But our work has changed that. Today, there are an estimated 1,700 individuals living in country that's been restored to its natural state.
There are more surprises in store for Andrea. The tamarin group hasn't just found the biological corridor. Some of the animals have started families, too. A baby is hanging firmly onto his father's long hair. The male tries to pass the burden back to the mother, but she keeps avoiding him. Two other members of the group are keen to carry the baby. The father would be happy to get rid of it, but a sense of duty prevents him from handing it over to just anyone. For the first 5 days, babies do not leave their mother's back, and then they move on to their fathers. Only when they're 20 days old can other tamarins volunteer to take them on their shoulders. Scraps and scuffles go on constantly in the shade of the revived tree canopy, which shows that even what humanity has unmade, it can still remake. The golden lion tamarin has narrowly survived the fragmentation and shrinkage of the Atlantic forest. Today, it's returning along with the jungle. The rescued species still has to deal with competition from rival intruders and will long depend on the tenuous efforts of a few humans. It is not out of the woods yet. The Mata Atlântica is still the world's most endangered forest outside Madagascar. With its eye on the Amazon, international opinion has forgotten that this green archipelago is sick and may still die engulfed by cities. The work already done is just a beginning. Soon, athletes from all over the world will be competing in the stadiums of Rio de Janeiro. They'll speak of hope, the future, and shared aims. But the ultimate challenge that faces them is actually the Atlantic forest, the Mata Atlântica.